There are objects in this world that seem to carry a weight beyond their physical form. An antique doll whose glass eyes seem to follow you. A painting that feels like it's looking back. We call them haunted, cursed. We tell ourselves they are vessels for forgotten spirits, tragic souls clinging to the familiar. But what if there's a new kind of haunting? A modern phenomenon for a digital age. What if an object doesn't need to be old to be haunted? What if it doesn't need a spirit attached to it at all? What if our own collective energy, our obsession, our desire, could be enough to give something life? Tonight, we open a case file on a phenomenon that blurs the line between pop culture and paranormal horror. It's a story that begins not in a dusty, forgotten antique shop, but on the brightly lit shelves of a modern art toy store. It's about a character beloved by millions, a mischievous, buck-toothed creature with long, rabbit-like ears. Its name is Labubu, created by a talented artist. Labubu is meant to be a symbol of playful adventure. But across the globe, a dark and growing collection of stories suggests that sometimes, when you bring a Labubu into your home, you are not just bringing home a piece of vinyl. You are inviting something else in. Something that watches from the shelf, that moves in the silence, that feeds on your devotion until it is strong enough to step out of the world of fantasy and into yours. We have collected hundreds of accounts, but tonight we present the 3 most chilling, most detailed, and most terrifyingly credible cases from our files. These are 3 true scary stories about Labubu. Our first account comes from a man named Alex, a 32-year-old graphic designer from Singapore. By his own admission, Alex was not just a collector, he was an obsessive. His life revolved around the acquisition of rare art toys. His apartment was less of a home and more of a private museum. His social life took place almost exclusively online, in forums and auction sites dedicated to the hunt. For 2 years, his holy grail, the centerpiece his collection lacked, was a single, elusive figure, the 2018 Midnight Bloom Labubu. It was a special edition, limited to only 100 pieces worldwide, a collaboration with a famous floral artist. Its design was unique, cast in a deep, semi-translucent purple vinyl, with delicate hand-painted silver flowers that seemed to grow across its body. To Alex, it wasn't just a toy, it was a masterpiece. He had alerts set up on every major auction site. He followed every lead, but the Midnight Bloom was a ghost. Its owners never sold. After 26 months of fruitless searching, a new post appeared on a niche collectors forum. The title was simple: Midnight Bloom for sale, urgent. The seller was an anonymous user with no post history. The price was inexplicably low, less than half of its estimated market value. The post was accompanied by a single, low-quality photo of the Labubu, sitting on a plain wooden table. The seller's only condition was that the transaction had to be in cash, and the buyer had to pick it up in person from a remote address. Red flags were everywhere, but Alex's obsession had become a fever. He saw only the prize, not the strangeness of the hunt. He contacted the seller, who replied in short, clipped sentences, agreeing to meet. The address was for a storage unit facility in a desolate industrial park, an hour's drive from the city. Alex drove there, on a humid Tuesday evening. The facility was a maze of identical, rust-colored metal doors under the buzzing orange glow of a few flickering sodium lamps. The cellar, a gaunt, twitchy man who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, was waiting for him. He didn't make eye contact. He simply took the envelope of cash, handed Alex a shoebox, and said, his voice a dry whisper, "Just take good care of it. It likes to be watched." Before Alex could ask what he meant, the man turned and practically ran to his car, speeding off into the night. Inside the shoebox, nestled in yellowed tissue paper, was the midnight bloom Labubu. It was perfect, more beautiful than the photos. But as Alex held it in his hands, he felt a strange, inexplicable coldness emanate from the vinyl, a chill that seemed to seep into his bones despite the humid night air. He ignored it. The fever of acquisition had been broken. The ghost was his. He took it home and gave it the place of honor, in the very center of his main display case, a king on its throne. For the first week, there was only joy. Alex would spend hours just looking at it, admiring the craftsmanship, the way the light caught the silver flowers. He posted photos online, basking in the envy of his fellow collectors. He finally had his centerpiece. The collection was complete. But a complete collection, he would soon learn, is a dead thing. And his collection was about to become anything but dead. The first anomaly was small. Alex came home from work to find the Labubu in its case had been turned slightly to the left, its head cocked, as if it were now looking at the other figures on the shelf instead of straight ahead. He was meticulous about his displays. He knew with absolute certainty that he had not left it that way. He assumed it must have been a vibration from a passing truck, a tremor too small to feel. He opened the case, carefully repositioned it, and locked the glass door. A few days later, it happened again. This time, it was turned a full 90 degrees, its back to the front of the case. The cold feeling pricked at him again, but logic was a powerful shield. The shelf isn't perfectly level, he told himself. I need to fix that. Then came the sounds, a faint, high-pitched giggle seeming to come from the living room in the dead of night. He would sit up in bed, straining to hear it again, but there would only be silence. He blamed it on the neighbors, on the building's old pipes. The real terror began when the other toys started to move. He came home one afternoon to find his entire collection of Cause figures, which were on a different shelf, lying face down on the floor in front of the Labubu's display case, arranged in a neat row like supplicants bowing before a monarch. There was no logical explanation for this. There was no earthquake. His windows were closed. He lived alone. He felt a wave of pure, unadulterated fear. He stared at the midnight bloom Labubu. In the soft afternoon light, its cheerful, buck-toothed grin seemed less like mischievous fun and more like a malicious, knowing smirk. Its big, black, painted eyes seemed to hold a depth, a darkness that wasn't just a reflection of the room. That night, his obsession began to morph into a waking nightmare. He couldn't sleep. He felt watched. He would sit in his living room in the dark, his eyes glued to the display case, waiting for something to happen. He bought a webcam and aimed it at the case, letting it record all night. The next morning, he sat down with his coffee, his hands trembling slightly, and played back the footage. For hours, it was a still, silent, boring video of his collection. Nothing. He felt a wave of relief mixed with embarrassment. He was going crazy. It was all in his head. He fast-forwarded through the last hour of footage, and then he saw it. At 4:17 a.m., the timestamp glowing in the corner of the screen, the Midnight Bloom Labubu moved. It wasn't a sudden jump. It was a slow, fluid, organic turn of its head. Its small vinyl head rotated with impossible smoothness to look directly at the webcam. It stared into the lens for a full, unblinking minute, and then its mouth, the painted, smiling, inanimate mouth, widened. Just a fraction of a millimeter, but it was undeniable. It widened, and then it returned to its normal size. Alex felt like his heart was going to explode. He played it back again and again. The movement was there. It was real. He should have thrown it out, smashed it, burned it. But his collector's obsession combined with his terror. He couldn't. It was his most prized possession, and a part of him, a dark, terrified part, felt like it was his, that it had chosen him. He started talking to it, whispering to it when he came home. He would rearrange the other toys to its liking. He became a servant to his own collection, a warden in his own personal museum of horrors. He stopped going out. He stopped answering calls from his friends and family. His world shrank to the four walls of his apartment and the silent vinyl figure in the glass case. He lost his job. He started to lose weight. His life was unraveling, and at the center of the spiral was Labubu. The climax came when his sister Maria, who hadn't heard from him in weeks, used a spare key to let herself into his apartment, expecting to find him sick or depressed. She found him sitting on the floor in the dark, staring at the display case, whispering to himself. The apartment was a mess. Takeout containers piled up, a sour smell in the air. She was horrified. She tried to talk to him, but he was distant, his eyes unfocused. Her gaze fell upon the Midnight Bloom Labubu. She didn't know why, but she felt a wave of revulsion, of pure hatred for the small, smiling object. "Alex, this is not healthy," she said, her voice shaking. This is what's doing this to you." She walked to the display case, unlocked it with a key she found on the counter, and reached in to grab the Labubu. "I'm taking this," she said. "We're getting you help." The moment her fingers touched the vinyl, every light bulb in the apartment exploded in a shower of sparks and glass. The display case door slammed shut with enough force to crack the glass, narrowly missing her hand. The other toys in the room began to shake violently on their shelves. A high-pitched, childish giggle echoed through the now dark apartment, seeming to come from the Labubu itself. Maria screamed and scrambled for the door. Alex didn't move. He just sat on the floor, a single tear rolling down his cheek and a small, faint smile on his lips. Maria fled the apartment and called the authorities. When they entered, they found Alex in the same position, catatonic. He was institutionalized for 6 months, treated for acute psychosis and a complete nervous breakdown. He never returned to the apartment. His collection was sold off by his family. All of it, except for the Midnight Bloom Labubu. When Maria and the movers went to pack it up, the display case was empty. The toy was gone. Alex is out now. He lives a quiet life. He no longer collects toys. He doesn't even like to have dolls or figures in his home. He says he sometimes still hears that high-pitched giggle in his dreams. He believes the entity that was attached to that toy wasn't just haunting it, it was feeding. It fed on his obsession, on his devotion, on his life. And when it was strong enough, it simply moved on, looking for its next collector. Our second case explores a different, more insidious kind of haunting. It's not about an object that is already possessed, but about an object that seems to bestow a gift that comes with a terrible, hidden price. This is the account of a young artist named Clara and the muse that consumed her. Clara was a struggling concept artist for a mobile game company in Vancouver. She was talented, but she was in a deep, desperate slump. For months, she had been suffering from a crippling creative block. Her designs were uninspired, her deadlines were piling up, and she was on the verge of being fired. Her passion had become a source of constant, agonizing pressure. One rainy Saturday, wandering aimlessly through a mall, she found herself in an art toy store. And she saw it. It wasn't a rare or expensive figure. It was a common, standard edition Labubu from the Monsters Patisserie series. It was the lemon tart version, a cheerful, bright yellow figure with its signature bucktooth grin. She wasn't a collector, but something about the creature's mischievous energy, its whimsical design, called to her. On an impulse, she bought it, thinking it might at least brighten up her drab studio. She placed the small yellow figure on her workstation, right next to her monitor. That night, for the first time in months, she began to draw. And she didn't stop. Ideas flowed out of her with a speed and brilliance she had never known. Her designs were fluid, imaginative, and breathtakingly original. She worked through the night, fueled by a manic energy, the little yellow Labubu staring at her with its wide, black eyes. By morning, she had completed a portfolio of work that was not just good, it was genius. She took the work to her boss on Monday. He was stunned. He not only took her off probation, but he promoted her, putting her in charge of the company's flagship new project. Clara's career, which had been on the brink of death, was suddenly resurrected. She was a star, and it was all thanks to her new muse, her little good luck charm. She became superstitious. She could only work when the Labubu was on her desk. She started talking to it, thanking it for the ideas. Her creativity was now a torrent. She was celebrated, successful, and sought after. But as her professional life blossomed, her personal life began to wither. The gift had a price. The first payment was sleep. She no longer needed it. She would work for 48, sometimes 72 hours straight, feeling no fatigue. Her friends grew concerned. She looked gaunt, her skin pale with dark, bruised-looking circles under her eyes. She stopped eating, subsisting on coffee and energy drinks. When her friends would beg her to rest, she would grow angry, paranoid, accusing them of being jealous of her success. The second payment was her art style. Her designs, once whimsical and bright, began to take on a darker, more unsettling edge. The characters she drew began to look more and more like Labubu. They had the same long ears, the same buck teeth, the same wide, vacant eyes. Her beautiful, imaginative worlds were now tinged with a subtle, grotesque horror. Her bosses loved it. They called it edgy and unique. The final payment was her sanity. The line between her art and her reality began to dissolve. She started seeing Labubu everywhere. The ears of a cat would look too long. The smile of a stranger on the bus would look too wide. She would see the familiar buck-toothed grin in the patterns of wood grain, in the shapes of clouds. The world was being remade in the image of her muse. The toy itself also seemed to change. Its yellow plastic seemed to grow brighter, more vibrant, as her own skin grew duller and paler. Its smile seemed to widen every time she completed a new, successful design. It was, she began to realize with a dawning, sickening horror, feeding on her. It wasn't giving her inspiration. It was draining her life force, her very essence, and converting it into creative energy. She tried to stop. She put the Labubu in a drawer. But the moment it was out of her sight, the creative flow stopped. Her mind became a barren desert. The pressure from her job was immense. She needed the ideas. After a single, agonizing day of staring at a blank screen, she retrieved the toy, her hands shaking, and placed it back on her desk. The moment she did, the ideas came flooding back. She was an addict, and the toy was her drug. The breaking point came when she was sketching. She was drawing a self-portrait, but her hand was not her own. She watched in horror as her pencil, moving with a will of its own, drew her face with the long ears, the black eyes, and the wide, buck-toothed grin of Labubu. She was no longer just drawing the monster. She was becoming it. With a scream of pure terror, she grabbed the yellow figure from her desk and threw it against the wall. It bounced off with a hollow plastic clatter. She snatched it up, ran to her kitchen, and threw it into the trash. She took the trash out that night, dumping it into the dumpster behind her apartment building. She spent the next 2 days in a state of withdrawal, shaking, unable to work, unable to think. But she felt a sense of freedom. It was over. On the third morning, she walked into her studio to try and start fresh. And there it was, sitting on her desk, in its usual spot next to her monitor, was the yellow Labubu. It was pristine, not a scratch on it. Its smile seemed wider than ever. That's when Clara finally broke. The secret of her inspiration was that it wasn't a gift. It was a parasitic relationship, a demonic entity wearing the skin of a cute vinyl toy had latched onto her, offering her the one thing she desired most in the world. And in exchange, it was slowly, methodically consuming her soul. She was just a battery, and it was draining her dry. Her landlord found her a week later, after her company reported her missing. The studio was a scene of a psychotic break. Every wall was covered in hundreds of terrifying, masterfully drawn images of Labubu, a gallery of her own personal demon. Clara was huddled in a corner, rocking back and forth, whispering, "It won't let me stop drawing." Clara was institutionalized. Her collection of Labubu art became a minor sensation in the outsider art world, hailed as the work of a tortured genius. After she was taken from her apartment, the cheerful yellow Labubu from the Monsters Patisserie series was never seen again. Our final account is a story of a different kind of horror. It's not a slow descent into madness, but a rapid, terrifying, real-time event. It's about a secret that wasn't in the past, but was sitting in the corner of the room, waiting for the parents to leave. This is the story of a babysitter named Maya. Maya was a 19-year-old college student who occasionally babysat to make extra money. She got a call for a new job, a wealthy couple in a newly developed, gated community. The job was simple. They had one 7-year-old son, Leo. All she had to do was watch him for a few hours while they went to a charity gala. When she arrived, she was struck by how sterile the house was. It was beautiful, all white walls, glass, and polished concrete, but it felt more like an art gallery than a home. And in a way, it was. The parents were avid art toy collectors. Every room had shelves filled with rare, expensive figures. The playroom, however, was dedicated to one specific character, Labubu. There were dozens of them. Small ones in display cases, medium-sized ones on shelves. And in the corner of the room, sitting upright in a small child-sized armchair, was a massive, life-sized Labubu doll. It was at least 4 feet tall, a perfect, scaled-up replica of the character, its long ears flopping to the side, its buck-toothed grin fixed in a state of permanent mischief. The mother explained that it was Leo's favorite. "He talks to it all the time," she said with a laugh. "He calls it his best friend." The child, Leo, was quiet and withdrawn. He barely said a word to Maya, communicating mostly with nods and single-word answers. He spent the entire evening in the playroom, sitting on the floor in front of the large Labubu doll, whispering to it, his back to Maya. It was a little strange, but Maya figured he was just shy. The parents left around 8 p.m. Maya put Leo to bed at 9. He went without any fuss. She read him a story, tucked him in, and left his door slightly ajar. She went back downstairs to the vast, silent living room to watch a movie. Around 10 p.m., she paused the movie to get a drink from the kitchen. As she walked past the open door of the playroom, she glanced inside, and she felt a jolt of surprise. The large Labubu doll was no longer sitting in its armchair. It was now lying on its side on the floor in the middle of the room. Maya frowned. She was certain Leo hadn't left his bedroom. She hadn't heard a thing. "He must have gotten up while I was in the bathroom," she thought. A little annoyed, she walked into the playroom, picked up the surprisingly heavy doll, and placed it back in its chair, making sure it was sitting upright. She went back to her movie. An hour later, she got up again. As she passed the playroom, her heart skipped a beat. The Labubu was off the chair again. This time, it wasn't on the floor. It was standing, propped against the far wall, its head tilted, facing the doorway, facing her. A real, cold fear began to creep in. This was not right. She walked slowly to the bottom of the stairs and listened. The upstairs was completely silent. She crept up the stairs and peeked into Leo's room. He was sound asleep in his bed, breathing softly. She went back downstairs, her mind racing. Was this some kind of elaborate prank? Were the parents watching her on a hidden camera, moving the doll remotely? It seemed absurd. She walked back to the playroom, her arms covered in goosebumps. She stared at the doll from the doorway, not wanting to get any closer. She decided to just leave it. She closed the playroom door and went back to the living room. At midnight, the power went out. The entire house was plunged into pitch darkness. The silence was absolute. Maya fumbled for her phone, her heart hammering. She turned on its flashlight. At the same moment, she heard a sound from upstairs. The sound of Leo crying. "Maya," he wailed, "I'm scared." She ran up the stairs, her phone's light bouncing chaotically off the walls. She pushed open his bedroom door. He was sitting up in bed, his face pale with terror, pointing with a trembling finger towards his open closet. "The monster is out," he whispered. "Your friend." He got out of his chair, and then she heard it. A slow, heavy, shuffling sound coming from the downstairs hallway. It was the sound of something heavy, with no real legs, dragging itself across the floor, and it was coming towards the stairs. It was the doll. Maya slammed Leo's bedroom door shut and locked it. She shoved a heavy dresser in front of it, her movements frantic. Leo was sobbing in his bed. "He's coming to play," he cried. The shuffling sound reached the top of the stairs. It stopped right outside their door. For a long, agonizing moment, there was only silence. And then the doorknob began to turn, slowly, methodically, back and forth. Maya and Leo huddled in the corner of the room, listening to the relentless, patient turning of the knob. The last thing Maya's account describes before she cut the 911 call short to hide in the closet was the sound of the heavy wooden door beginning to splinter around the lock. The secret of this family was not a person or a memory. It was an object. An object the parents knew was not just a doll. A best friend for their lonely son that was also a living, malevolent entity. A silent guardian that when the sun went down and the parents were away, liked to come out and play. An obsessive collector driven to madness. A creative genius consumed by her own muse. A babysitter trapped in a house with a living doll. 3 stories, all centered on a simple, smiling art toy. They ask a chilling, modern question. In a world where we pour so much of our energy, our passion, and our obsession into inanimate objects, what happens when one of them starts to feel that devotion and decides it wants more? What do you think is the truth behind the strange stories surrounding Labubu? A modern myth or something more? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you appreciate these deep dives into the unsettling and the unexplained, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more long-form horror stories. Thank you for watching.
Prince of Darkness.